Welcome. Let's get started, everyone. Welcome to the serverless launch. My name is Alex. I am the founder and CEO of Redpanda. Thank you so much for spending time with us this morning. As is our tradition, this event is jam-packed with announcements in 5 to 10-minute increments. They are designed to be short, crisp, educational, and to the point. So let's get going. If you haven't already, please, I encourage you to try out our serverless link. It'll be down in the comments below, and we'll post it also on the YouTube in the comments. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be joined by some of our partners from AWS Serverless, Quix, and you're going to hear from one of our customers, Juxhin, who's the head of engineering at Exein, an next-gen IoT company, so that he can share with you his journey of using Redpanda in production over the last several months. We are also going to have a live demo, and so let's keep our fingers crossed to the demo gods. During the live demo, if you're part of the audience, my ask is that you start counting the number of seconds, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, to what we call a time to wow experience. More on that later. So we will also close this event with an AMA session joined by our customers, the Redpanda product and engineering team, and a link to a hands-on lab that we're going to be going over today. So if you have any questions at any point during the session or during any of the speaker notes or the demo, just type them in. And the product and engineering team are also dialed into this session. And we'll be able to start to cover all of the live. And so we'll be able to actually tweak our content. With that, I wanted to get started with what I like to call the Hollywood highlights. And so the hero of the Redpanda story has always been you, the builder, the hacker, the doer, the maker. And today I want to share the journey of getting to a multi-tenant, super cost-effective, scale to zero offering to hopefully empower you to build a better future. And so when we started Redpanda about 5 years ago or so, we started building the product that we wish we had. So we departed away from, frankly, what felt like distributed systems whack-a-mole, where if something went wrong, you were really trying to figure out what to do. And so the original model of deployment was that we put a single binary on 1, 2, 3 computers, and that was it. What we learned is that that wasn't enough to bring cost effectiveness, because the next bottleneck for people that were running at true scale was that local disk was so expensive that they could only retain a little bit of their data in the real-time clusters. And so we offloaded all of the storage to S3 or Google Cloud Bucket or Azure Blob Store to a bucket storage system while maintaining a low latency tier in your cluster. But the true storage was became the S3 bucket. In between, we built what we call the BYOC serverless, BYOC service, which gave people the ability to run a fully managed SaaS inside their account. And so what we did is we divorced the control and data plane, and the data plane lives inside your network, giving you sovereignty in addition to privacy. And of course, you get SOC 2, Type 2, and HIPAA and all of that. But what we managed to achieve with that is that we place you at the centerpiece of owning your data. Redpanda control plane never sees any of your actual data. But today, we want to focus on serverless. And so I want to share the journey over the last 2 years, what we've been working for over the last 2 years. And so we started with the idea that we wanted to bring to people the ability to absorb spikes. And Juxhin today is going to join us and talk about today, and as well as our partners from Amazon, kind of giving you primitives of why leverage a system like, really any serverless system. But technically, it was a maniacal focus on the virtualization of the Kafka protocol for a massive multi-tenancy. And then being able to scale that to zero when you didn't have any resource usage. Most importantly, it was truly about being able to deliver to you the user experience we had envisioned. And so today we are releasing Redpanda Serverless in limited availability. And the magic to those of us new is that the ability to create a globally available cluster in less time than it takes you to blink an eye. And so For those of us that have been following Redpanda for a long time, you have come to know and love the performance and low latency that Redpanda gives you. And Redpanda Serverless doesn't depart away from that. So it still gives you this cost effectiveness while maintaining the low latency that people have come to know and love from our brand. And so the idea was that in a world where the internet is the computer, a system like Redpanda Serverless will be the thing that are going to glue all of these disparate services together. I don't want to hold back the lineup of speakers. And so I want to introduce you to one of my favorite humans, Christina Lin. She is our head of developer advocacy, who will be doing a live demo of Redpanda Serverless. So again, in your mind, once she tells you to start counting 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. And so with that, I'm going to invite Christina Lin to join us. Christina, welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Alex, for a great opening. So let's get started with the demo right away. So this is a very typical scenario. When I was a developer, I was normally told by my manager, this time it's Sean, he there asked me to create a ticketing system, a event-driven ticketing system that needs to be done in a week. So I was kind of in struggle, like, okay, I need to get this thing done. So I was kind of going to the DevOps or the ops person in my company. I was like, all right, so I need to have a streaming platform right away. But he was like, yeah, it's okay, but I don't want you to be like jeopardizing our core system. So you're not going to use our Kafka cluster in production right now. So I have to figure out a way to do that. So you know what's going on? I am using Redpanda Serverless. So in order for me to actually get a cluster running, you think it's going to be a heck of a lot of work. It's actually not. So all I have to do is go in and start creating clusters. So in Redpanda Serverless clusters, you get to create multiple virtual clusters. The reason behind it is because you're going to use different clusters for different purposes. So you want to isolate your traffic or your workload. This is the best way you can kind of identify all together. So I'm going to go ahead and create a serverless cluster. And why don't you all start counting with me? So Alex, like this is our moment. Let's get started counting.
All right, let's do it. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4. There we go.
What?
By 3.5 seconds.
It's less than one. That's what I expected. I was kind of asking like count to 5, but wow. Okay. I wowed. All right, so this is the Redpanda Serverless cluster. You get that in less than 3 seconds, right? So I don't have to ask for my DevOps person. I have a cluster running. And the best thing about this, if you're new to streaming, we have a lot of tools that allows you to get started. If you're a Go person, we give you getting started with streaming code. If you're Python or if you're a Node.js person, we get you like getting started best experiences. And if you're like a CLI person, you don't like GUI interface, we also give you that CLI tools that you can interact with. But for people like me that likes graphics, I like things that's like in my face, showing me what's going on. So I get this very wonderful interface where I can start creating topics, right? So I'm just gonna go ahead and create topics for my demo. And if you think this is a very fast cluster where you're not gonna you cannot do a lot of configurations, you're wrong, because you can do everything here. So you can do, we can configure the number of partitions that we want. We can actually set retention numbers for our storages. Everything is just like what you have as a normal cluster. So now I have a cluster that's running. So you're like, all right, so what about securing this cluster? How do I do that? Well, you can also do that with going into the security inside the configuration. So everything is very visual, but you can also do that CUI. But I'm going to do it the visual way. So when I create a users, I can create an admin user, like how I would do that in a normal Redpanda cluster, but just securing it. So now I have an ID and password credential that is ready to be used. And now I can set different permission for this particular users if they're allowed to only write to a certain topics, or configuring rights to a certain user consumer groups, or even just transaction or cluster permissions. You can all configure it here. It's very just self-explanatory. And for the time being, for the demo, I'm just going to go ahead and create, just assign all permissions for this particular users. And boom, I'm done. Like my configuration for this cluster is done. So what do I need to do now? So then I'm going to start deploying my applications. The applications need to be also scalable. Therefore, that's why I started working with AWS Lambda, and I uploaded my Python applications into Amazon Lambda. So basically just I don't have to, setting up EC2 instance or whatever, everything's just provisioned for me. I can write my Python applications like starting to collect monies. And then all I have to do is just configure my Kafka triggers. And Redpanda is compatible with Kafka. So basically all I have to do is just enter the credentials and where my Redpanda cluster is, and off I go. I can now have a application, event-driven application running for my ticketing system. So why don't I go ahead and start, getting some tickets in, right? So now I can see now the tickets are now flooding into my system. I'm actually getting it right away. And if you take a look at my actual cluster, so I have a pre-created cluster because I don't want to say everything about, but this is exactly the same as what it was before. And you can now see data are coming into my cluster. And the best thing about this is I can get to see all the real-time data that comes into the topics. And this is awesome for me as a developer because I get to debug looking at the data. What do you think about this, Alex? Awesome, right?
I feel wowed, and I've actually seen this. It's every time people create a cluster, just because you can select any region in the world, and like the fact that it's so fast, I'm always wowed, and this is awesome to see. I think this is what people had envisioned for connecting serverless. Thank you. This was awesome. Well done.
I mean, like you brought up a good points about regions. So you want it to be closer to your workload. So we definitely can get you to closer to where your workload is. And you know what? The best thing about this particular cluster is that my manager, again, told me that, hey, you need to destroy everything because we're not paying this after the events. You know what I told him to do? Like, that's fine. You don't have to do it because everything is pay as you go. So all I have to do is stop the ticketing coming in and I stop paying. And if ever I needed to create another event again, I'm just going to go ahead and create another cluster in less than 3 seconds. That is the power of serverless. It's pay as you go, it's scalable, it's fast, instance agile. So definitely recommend you to come and play with it. And also, just a quick reminder for everybody, we're doing a workshop with AWS Lambda in the future. So we'll be pinging you about this. So it's so you can get started with all these awesome experiences. With that, I want to hand it over back to Alex.
Thank you, Christina. And for those of you that have tuned in, we're going to publish the link to the code that Christina just ran on her laptop so that you can test it yourself soon. So stay tuned. We'll definitely post that code. I couldn't think of a better person to kick off this launch stream than the most successful serverless company in the world. Would love to welcome to the stage Tarun. He is a product senior manager at AWS Lambda. Just to hear from him firsthand, how is it to leverage, serverless systems for production workload? This is probably, the person that has seen scale both for people getting started and getting to large production workloads. Tarun, super excited to have you. As we were planning this launch, one of the things that caught my eye was just your obsession of basically helping developers go from idea to production. So we'd love to just get your thoughts and kick us off there. Maybe introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex, and congrats to folks on Redpanda on a phenomenal launch. And hi to the builders who are viewing this. I'm Tarun. I'm on the product team at AWS Lambda. And to your point, Alex, like mirroring your ethos, Redpanda's ethos of making builders, the developers, the hero of the story. We at Lambda strive to be the fastest, the simplest way for these builders to go from zero, from idea to innovation at scale, right? And so what these customers across the spectrum, right, building real-time, performant, streaming data applications, what customers across the spectrum, it could be an individual developer or a large enterprise, which has segregation of operators and developers. What they tell us is they really want to accelerate their business outcomes, right? And so what it means to them is focusing on the business logic that matters to them and offloading all the operational overhead around infrastructure management, security patching, provisioning, right? And so where serverless really comes in, is through these core values of simplicity, scale, and speed. Let me explain this with the shared context of Redpanda Serverless and Lambda, right? we just saw the demo from Christina, and so you saw how easy it is to configure Redpanda cluster with Lambda. That's simplicity for you, right? As soon as you're done, you started seeing the traffic for your ticketing sales, right? Which means you didn't have to provision anything. You could scale up right away. You offload that operational overhead. Simplicity and offloading operational overhead brings speed, right? And finally, you have an application that scales to meet your peak demands. Like for instance, your ticketing case would have a highly spiky, unpredictable demand pattern. You have an application, you have a streaming data platform, and you have a consumer that scale to meet your peak demands and go back to zero, right?
One of the things, just to like piggyback on what you're saying, is that what perhaps, maybe, and just to highlight it for the audience, is that was a real production application. Like that wasn't
Exactly.
a toy. Like you could go on AWS Lambda console and then, just basically absorb a giant spike. And similarly with the Redpanda serverless, like, these are sort of production level, and we're going to hear from Eugene in the next panel. But I think that was just a point I wanted to highlight. It's like, it seems so easy that people, maybe associated with like, oh, it's a toy. And maybe this was the challenge originally when you brought the serverless idea to market, the team brought the serverless idea to market. They're like, hey, I don't know, maybe just a toy, maybe just getting started. But there are some real, hard engineering production workloads, with Amazon Lambda and Redpanda serverless.
Exactly. And so exactly to what you said, right? Simplicity, speed, scale. And so we hear, like, I want to share what customers tell us, right? Customers tell us that customers who have adopted the serverless mindset, right, tell us that they see real gains in developer productivity and efficiency, like application efficiency, business outcomes, right? And that's where I really see Redpanda serverless, and together with a consumer like an application like Lambda, really driving that value of serverless, true value of serverless for these customers who want these highly performant streaming applications.
One of the things that, like as an engineer, I suppose I haven't written code in the last couple of years, but growing up as an engineer, the thing that clicked for me when we were thinking through the product vision for this almost 2.5 years ago, was that like Lambda, Amazon Lambda and Redpanda serverless really sort of focuses the developer attention on being able to process the business events as they're happening, like literally one event at a time. Like things don't happen in aggregate. Like the world happens in real time. And so would love to hear from you. And I think for the audience to get a sense of the kinds of use cases that, you would see successful with Amazon Lambda and Redpanda serverless.
Absolutely, right? And that's the value of having these event-driven applications where you essentially have loosely coupled or decoupled producers and consumers, and so they operate independently, right? That's where we really see, we call them EDAs, right? It's also almost that EDA paradigm. And so to give you folks an example of the use cases, right? You are a cybersecurity company who ingests millions of log files into Redpanda clusters, right? You have a highly unpredictable, bursty workload, and what we're really trying to do is anomaly detection or threat detection, right? What you really want, like for such use cases, what you really want is a streaming data platform that auto scales to meet your peak demands, and a consumer similarly that can take in or like absorb those spikes to be able to process those high value business events, and generate those insights, right? And at the same time, when you have a lean period or you don't have any traffic, you want to scale it down to zero because you want cost effectiveness. I know you and Christina referred to that earlier, right? It's this balance between high performance and cost effectiveness that I see serverless as like providing that true value. And same with Redpanda serverless and Lambda, I see that going a step further.
Yeah, and there's this freedom from the developer and the architect that I think is worth highlighting, where when you decouple the producers and the consumers in a way where the topic data, is uploaded to S3 for efficiencies, basically for cost efficiencies, etc. is that it's very freeing from an architect because you don't have to make all of the decisions a priori, right? Like today, you could send it to whatever, Amazon RDS as the final dashboard that people are going to query. It's like, do you or do you not have a whatever, an attack happening right now in your network? Or, but maybe tomorrow you want to send it to Athena or maybe to a different provider like a Databricks or Mongo or whatever it is. Like, and so when you use a streaming service, right, it's sort of bringing, almost the best of both worlds. It's like the simplicity of a scale of, like you write a single Python file, as you saw here Christina do. I don't know what, that was like 100 lines of Python. And then you connect the two services and we'll handle the scale, we'll handle the scale to 0. It's usage-based billing too, right? Like down to, I think for us is around, 50 minutes or so. And so being able to not worry, like Christina mentioned, hey, look, if the cluster isn't producing, just stop it. Like you don't have to do anything else. There's no metadata. There's nothing that you need to do. Just like stop the workload, and then everything sort of automatically stops charging you money. And so both the ability to absorb a spike and the ability to scale to 0 has been the thing that has attracted most of the developers. And then at an architectural level is the ability to future-proof your architecture by putting it in a messaging system like Redpanda, where today you're connected with a particular service and then tomorrow with another. And then as you're building the chain of compute of, let's say, Lambda and like Redpanda and then another Lambda and Redpanda, like at the end of it, you have something useful. Maybe, you're also set up cron jobs or whatever it is. Like, hey, let's look at some particular a time. And so as you see people scale in volumes, like what has been the maturity, maybe as a closing thought for us here, is like, what has been like the cultural evolution of the engineer at this large organization in adopting serverless. So first, like, hey, let me get started because it's cost effective. But over time, they actually change how they think about building applications.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very pertinent point you made. And so over the years, we've seen this evolution curve in terms of how customers have thought about serverless, right? Few years ago, it was more about why serverless, right?
Yeah.
And so you had to explain, you'd likely have to explain these value props, which I think are so obvious today. And hence you see the proliferation of the serverless paradigm. After that, like going forward, as you realize you catered to both like the startup segments, digitally native organizations, as well as enterprises, right? You customers asked us for the granular level of primitives controls to be able to manage their governance goals, and the scaling and performance and simplicity goals for the builders themselves, right? And so we went ahead, build all those primitives. And so fast forward today, what builders tell us is, hey, we understand it's not a question of why serverless and the primitives, we already have them. And now so customers are telling us, how do I leverage serverless, in a serverless first mode where everything that can be offloaded to AWS and to serverless, I want to do that, right? It's only when something like Lambda serverless paradigm is not a great fit, maybe for longer running tasks, is when you want specialized solutions. So I think like we've seen that curve from why serverless to give me the primitives, and now how do I, build as much as I can on serverless.
Yeah, thank you. It reminds me of an old saying. A close friend of mine likes to say, it's like, sometimes you have to break eggs to make an omelet. And I feel like in the beginning, people were like, I don't believe you. This like doesn't make any sense. Why serverless? Like, this is not gonna work, this and that. And then a few years later, you kind of have to let people come down a bit. They're like, it is actually a super useful primitive and paradigm. And like, hey, let's even take perhaps a subset of how people would get started with, like, perhaps dev and QA and the ability to programmatically bring up things up and down, right? And so there's like, here, the way I generally think about this, that these are tools for the developer to go and hopefully build a better future, but there's like a multitude of services here for people to choose. With that, Tarun, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really helpful to hear firsthand from the most successful product team in the world building serverless at massive, massive scale. So thanks again for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you. Would love to bring to the stage Juxhin, who is the head of engineering at Exein, and Tun, who is the head of data at Quix. Welcome both. Eugene, would love to get started with you. Serverless was built and designed for you, to a large extent. In fact, you were one of our design partners, right? So would love to hear your story as to like how you are leveraging Redpanda Serverless, how you're thinking about it, like what was the product evolution, what kind of were the engineering challenges that we help you with, and then we'll go over to Tun in a second.
Great, thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. First of all, great launch. My name is Eugene. I'm the head of engineering at Exein. We're really a leading cybersecurity startup based in Italy, focused on embedded and IoT devices, essentially. So the ability to enable security for these devices at scale. And we've been previous customers of Redpanda on the managed service. So we've been with Redpanda for a while, and we've actually strategically moved to serverless entirely, which has been a really great journey.
Yeah, and what made you, just curious, what made you switch to serverless? And I think when we originally connected, we're like, hey, perhaps the original offer, we're scaling to zero multiple times a day, and so there's probably a better offer. But I think for the engineers in the audience, the people that we're hoping to make a hero here is what were some of the engineering challenges that we help you solve? And then perhaps we can talk a little bit about like this idea. Christina showed it today, right? So fast to create a cluster that when you were creating dev and QA clusters and all that lifecycle. But yeah, let's start with perhaps like the technical challenges of why Redpanda Serverless.
Yeah. So taking a step back just very briefly, the technical objective here is to enable thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of devices to stream security events to a soft real-time dashboard. And Redpanda is one of the core, if not the most core service in there, because it acts as sort of the load regulator between these agents and the user, right? So one key requirement is that you never want to slow any of these devices down because they're resource constrained. So you need to be able to absorb that traffic without any back pressure. At the same time, you don't want to allow spikes to affect the user dashboards, to affect the insights or metrics. And Redpanda as a service is really there to absorb that. So one key scenario is most of the time your device isn't doing much. That's very interesting. But all of a sudden, if you're receiving a volumetric attack from somewhere, you have a huge asymmetric spike that's happening for a short, hopefully, period of time. Now, with the managed version, we had to sort of provision ourselves for that, for that ceiling, right? So we had to say, okay, we think that, in the worst case, if thousands of these devices are being hit, this is the volume of traffic. Whereas with serverless, it doesn't really matter as much because what we really care about is, what are the clusters we need to point to, and how well can it absorb that traffic normally and go down where it needs to. So you're not paying for the ceiling. You're paying essentially for the average or the floor for the most part, which for us has been exceptionally helpful over the time.
Yeah, definitely. It's like there are this natural use case in my mind. I think attacks, cybersecurity attacks is probably the quintessential use case for this like serverless spike. Like, hey, we'll absorb this spike and then we'll scale to zero. Because usually, and for most people, until you get pretty large, like whatever, in the large city and a scale, which it does last for a couple of days. For most people, for most small businesses or medium businesses, right? Like you're talking about perhaps an hour or a few hours of particular spike. But the gap between baseline and spike could be 100x. And so it's just so like almost cost prohibitive for a business to provision for an 100x, right? And like the stateful workloads are, it's not like, it isn't a compute thing where you just like, oh, let's spin up more services. Like we have to balance the data and leadership has to be balanced. And like you have to have, usual throughput and you have to have anti-entropy mechanism for disk rebalance and all of these things. And so when the gap is so large, we're talking about 100x at scale, the ability to scale back down was super helpful. And then before we switch it over to Tun for a second here, you mentioned when we were originally chatting and we're like, hey, look, Exein, like this is some like real product feedback, and we were like writing the gist of about, giving it out to a few select customers, like, let me call Eugene and see, or let us actually, Vlado, who's here from the product team, is like, let us call Eugene and see if he's, interested in trying this out. There was a secondary benefit to your engineering team, which was this idea of creating these ephemeral clusters, but like full high fidelity production workloads that are super fast. Maybe you can share with the audience your experience there.
I was about to get that. So you picked it out of my brain. One other use case, and you think of Christina's demo, is these ephemeral clusters. So these short-lived clusters where, say you want to do a soak test and you don't want to impact dev, stage, prod, whatever environment that you have. And you really want to isolate it because you really want to be empirical in terms of the performance and where the back pressure of your system is. The ability to create a cluster for a short period of time, this could be a matter of days or hours, depending on your test, and send as much traffic as you need to send to understand where in your system you're having back pressure. And having Redpanda absorb that without any issue has been exceptionally great, because you can run these experiments without having to spend a week setting up your own probably community edition version of it, or B, having to use a fully managed service or a BYOC service where the overhead, the operational overhead, is prohibitive. So serverless really unlocks that, which any of the other offerings don't really provide as cleanly as serverless does.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, guys. We literally couldn't be here without you. Like, I feel that it was a great partnership to have you, try out the earlier versions of this, and having you run in production and making you successful. Without you, we wouldn't be here. So thank you so much. With that, I'd love to welcome Tun to the stage. Tun, you are the head of data for Quix. So tell us more about what is Quix, what is your role there, and how do you see Redpanda Serverless and Quix Serverless sort of working together to help some of the engineers in the audience?
Cool. Thank you very much, Alex, for inviting me on, and congratulations on a successful serverless launch. So Quix is a Python native stream processing framework. So we have Quix Streams, which is an open source stream processing library based on function as a service with Docker, and Quix Cloud, which is a fully managed platform for building and running data pipelines. My role there is to engage with the community and the customers and just build a better product. So we're trying to grow the community. So that's really what I'm focused on.
Yeah. And how do you see, I guess, our users potentially leveraging Quix to, maybe put an anomaly detection pipeline together? Like, maybe tell us more about the developer environment, like where, how can Quix help some of the developers here?
Right, so Quix aligns with Redpanda's mission of providing an alternative to teams that are looking for simplicity and want no Java or JVM in their tech stack. So we're observing this new wave of data engineers that want to build using Python because it's easy to learn and it has a rich library ecosystem for data that's like really well battle tested. So we have a dedicated team that works on the Quix Streams open source client. It's Python native. It's great for developers because it doesn't wrap around other languages, which means great things such as proper line-by-line debugging and integration with all your favorite Python libraries. And we have Quix Cloud, which is our fully managed platform and takes care of CI/CD to build and run your data pipelines. So like Redpanda, we offer a serverless option. So for the developers, they get to be the hero in this story, and you can focus on delivering the value through building software and saving them from the distraction of operating and managing infrastructure.
I think it's true. There's this like difficult, right? So like there's basically multiple levels of infrastructure expertise, as there would, because people like need to be experts in just about everything these days if you're a developer. And one of the challenges with the data science team, which is kind of really the core persona that Quix is trying to help here, is that to debug any of this infrastructure feels so daunting and challenging. And so the idea of having like a Python only with no wrappers, designed to give you line-by-line debugging in a serverless cloud, sort of, is a huge help for some of the teams. I think we are going to see a demo from you today, and so perhaps we can now get over to you to just show the the audience here, like, hey, what's a typical use case? Like, how do you connect these two things together? So if I'm a developer, right, and I'm dialing in today, and over the next 2 minutes, I just want to know, I was like, give me the bluff. And my wife is a writer, and she always, when she critiques all the pieces that I write, she's like, Alex, bottom line up front. Like, what are you trying to tell me? So hopefully for the developers, the next 2 minutes is the bottom line up front of Quix and Redpanda, and you're going to get to see firsthand what it's like to build a pipeline. So Tun, if you want to take it away.
Cool. Okay. So hopefully you're seeing my screen now. So you're at quix.io, our homepage. Right at the top, there's a menu item called templates. So if you click on that, you get through to our gallery. So we've got a sample of different starter projects here. So you can continuously update a vector store, for example, or do predictive maintenance. But let's start off simple. So we'll click on Hello Quix. So I'm already logged into my Quix Cloud account, actually. So when I click this button for clone this project, that will open. And this will enable me to switch to an advanced config here and start importing this project. So what's happening now is Quix Cloud is creating your Git repository, and it's copying over all that source code for that starter project. So it should take a few seconds to do that. So whilst it's wearing away, I'm going to get my credentials for Redpanda. So here are the environment settings. So I'll set it to demo and the main Git branch. Continue, and here we go. We'll set up Redpanda Serverless here. So here's the URL. I'm just going to grab it. And the credentials, demo user, and the password. I'm going to leave synchronized topics ticked so that it will synchronize in from my existing topics on the cluster. That's all looking good. So let's continue and create that environment. Now, this is going to take a few seconds to do. So here's one I prepared earlier. Let's click through. And what you see now is Quix's pipeline view. So you'll see the boxes here. Each of those boxes represents a QuickStreams application, which is Dockerized and deployed as a container. And you'll see these green arrows. Those are Redpanda topics, and you see them lit up in green. So this is a name counter application. I'll just click through real quick. And here at the top, you can see the throughput changing in real time for this topic on Redpanda Serverless. In this application, I'm just logging out names and counting them. So if I go to the Messages tab, I can also view the raw data coming in as JSON. Now, we've talked a lot about Python, so I'll leave you with this last bit. So when I click on Edit Code, you'll see we have a Cloud IDE as well, where you can view and edit your Python code and deploy from here. So yeah, that was a very quick whistle-stop tour.
Thank you so much, Tun, for that. And then I'm going to mispronounce your name, so I apologize for that. But Igodaro Daniel, you raised your hand. Just type in the chat if you have a question. We have like hundreds of people dialing for this thing. So if you just type in your chat, we'll probably be able to help you faster. Tun and Eugene, thank you so much for joining us today. We really couldn't be here without you and your partnership, Tun, and obviously Eugene. Thank you so much for joining us today. With that, would love to welcome Christina Lean again, my head of dev advocacy, as I mentioned, one of our favorite people. Christina, welcome back on the screen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. So before we dive into our AMA, Ask Me Anything segment, we do want to ask you one question. So we're going to get started with the poll, kind of just asking you, what is your level of experiences with Redpanda? Kind of just understand a little bit about the background of everybody. Just going to give people a second to complete this, and then we can get on to our Ask Me Anything segment.
Maybe for those of you, while we're waiting for some of the answers to come in, those of us that are undecided to answer, just vote. And I wonder, maybe we'll have a live poll if we have time to do this. Like if people counted the seconds, like how many people actually counted the number of seconds, and if it was in line with their experience. I feel that it's like I literally looked at most infrastructure companies. I was like, what is the best time to wow? And this was something early. So with RPK, I'll tell a story while we wait for this, because we have about 20 seconds left in the poll, is when Juan was building the RPK experience. So Juan is our developer. He's in Colombia. He's great. And he's like, hey, what should we build for the RPK experience? I was like, the time to wow has to be under 60 seconds. Like that was the time to wow. And so RPK container start was literally when I was like, we cannot release a product to the world that it takes more than 60 seconds for a developer to wow. I think the ability to get to 3.5 seconds, as we saw today, it's probably the best version of that. Like an order of magnitude less than we started with 5 years ago. So anyways, just kind of wondering if people have comments, just write on the chat.
That's actually a good point, Alex. I think I want to do a challenge for everybody. So everybody, after this talk, go into Redpanda Serverless, sign up, and tell us, like, if you manage to start up your cluster, then less than 5 seconds. Let us know in Slack, because we're all active in Slack community. Come and tell us. And if you're also wowed, also let us know, because I want to see everybody's reaction when they've created a cluster, right? So let's do that challenge. So everybody, after today's talk, go ahead and sign up for serverless. I want to see if you're also wowed as well. All right, I think we're ready for the AMA section. All right, so let's bring up all the guests here, Tarun, Tun, and Juxhin, and also Alex. Welcome back to the Ask Me Anything segment. So we're just gonna go ahead and ask Tarun. So hi, Tarun. Thanks for the whole for the AWS talk a little bit about what it is and all that. So I want to ask you a quick question. Like, so there's things that people are asking, like, what is the mindset shift that has evolved since people getting started with the serverless journey? Obviously, serverless has been here for a while already. So what's kind of the mindset shift that you see people have, especially the streaming world, like in 2024?
Yeah, hi, Christina. And it goes back to something I was sharing with Alex earlier, right? We started off, the narrative was, or the mindset was why should I use serverless? Like, what's the value proposition? What are the cost savings and so on? Over the years, it's evolved into give me the primitives. And now more and more, like we see the conversations being around how do I use serverless to build my most demanding, variable load workloads and streaming data applications, right? Could be examples like cross-account use cases or scaling improvements, governance controls, and so on, right? And so and how do I build those modern serverless, well-architected, event-driven applications, right? So it's more around educating, and so on. Like that's how the mindset and narrative has evolved.
Definitely, good answer. I think that's great because I'm also seeing that since I know, to be honest with you, this is like actually the first time I actually created an application on top of Lambda. That was very easy and it was scalable. It's awesome. I don't have a huge learning curve as well. So definitely a good user developer experiences, and love to see more work together with Redpanda and AWS Lambda. Perfect. Thank you. So and this question is going to Tun. All right. So great demo, by the way. Really like that quick through. So, tell us more about the Quix route in Formula One racing. That's awesome, like cool. How has that shaped your view on real-time data systems?
Yeah, great question. And the rumors are true. Formula One racing is a highly competitive and time-critical working environment.
Right.
So you've probably seen the cars zooming around. So at the speeds that those racing cars go, a few milliseconds can equate to several meters on the racetrack. So the beauty of streaming is that it enables those low latency insights over fast-moving data. However, a lot of teams out there, they don't place as much importance on processing data quickly. So they're typically dealing with things like unpredictable data patterns. And so I learned that the same real-time systems are a perfect solution for that. And we all know that constantly polling a slowly changing data source is really wasteful on resources. So switching to an incremental or a streaming approach is really the way to go.
That's awesome. So that's good, but then this is all like on-prem and all that. But now Redpanda and Quix both have serverless and BYOC options. So do you think the delivery model will kind of help with our, especially with your go-to-market strategy as well?
Yeah, but it's helped massively because it's enabled us to serve a diverse range of customers. So serverless has been popular with small teams, especially those looking to prove out a new area of business at a company or to build hobby projects. And BYOC has been the go-to option for more mature companies with platform expertise. And they may also have strict requirements for data privacy, data security, and data sovereignty. So yeah, it's been fantastic having these options.
Definitely. I do feel if you're so dedicated, like Formula One, you do need some dedicated cluster, but you're starting with your local motor racing, you might want to start with serverless first. You need that data anyway. So definitely going to give it a try. Awesome. So Eugene, it's your turn. So you've got a lot of questions here. So quick questions. How are you combining the streaming data and machine learning to like secure your custom IoT fleet? Because obviously, IoT signals that needs to be secure and all that. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, the first part is that we do the inference on edge, so on these devices. But the really interesting part, which Redpanda really helps, is that when on demand, we essentially open up the valve and send as much traffic as we can from these devices through Redpanda. And that's when we actually do the training part of it. So there are some periods where we want to say, okay, be conservative about what you tell us is happening on the device, but then we can just flip a flag and send as much traffic as we can to really see what's happening on that device, do our training, and then automatically have a machine learning model that is propagated from our ML service all the way back to the device. And that kicks in and does the inference. So it's it enables a very iterative approach to model learning and model updates, which is extremely, extremely helpful, especially in the context of cybersecurity.
I do think that is very genius, because I think a lot of the time that we associate machine learning with static batch learning, so everything is kind of slow. But the way you did it, you kind of enable really fast machine learning and have the inference in real-time update. So I think that implementation is super cool. So in terms of like, now you talk about like all the data coming in for the machine learning, assume it's a huge load, right? So do you find the performance of Redpanda Serverless, what's kind of the difference do you see, like if you're running, your data on serverless and, running the Redpanda by yourself? Like, are there any performance difference and all that?
To answer it short, no. we don't. We streamline things quite a bit. We keep everything as really small and tiny as we can. And these agents send very primitive, bite-sized events. And Redpanda works very well with that. If you, of course, have very, very large messages, then performance might start to be an issue. But when you have 100 to 200 byte messages, it works exceptionally well. And honestly, there's never been any difference between the managed version and serverless in terms of performance.
Wow. I mean, huge applause to the serverless team, by the way. Like, great job on the making sure that nothing is different, like the performances especially with the multi-tenancy clusters, right?
And we were beta used, just to clarify, like Alex was saying, we went in there knowing, like, I went to the team like, listen, guys, we're going to go in there. Things might get a bit choppy. This is uncharted territory, so be ready. And I promise you, it has been the most boring, like, Slack Connect channel between us, because it's been so quiet. We never had any hiccups whatsoever. So it's been really great job to the team.
I never like boring stuff, but when you say a boring Slack,
I love
between
it.
customer, that's good.
I get to sleep.
Perfect. Great.
Exactly. One of the things that we kind of obsessed over in the beginning with like, Travis and Vlad on the serverless team here working for a few years on this was, how do we achieve multi-tenancy? And so I wrote a tweet about it, which is like, we have a front-end proxy tier that does like Kafka protocol virtualization at the front end, and then it virtualizes the multiple backend cells. And so there's going to be more follow-up content on that for the rest of the world. That is a very different architecture for most people. But one of the things that it solves that, perhaps would be a challenge with other implementations is this ability to absorb tiny writes. So you can send, basically an inordinate amount of tiny writes, and then we'll batch them in the backend, because the front-end proxies to the backend cells, we'll buffer, right? So we'll debounce the message rate, let's say for like, 2 or 3 milliseconds or whatever it is. And then we'll send that to the backend. And so we'll like rebatch and compress it in ways that are more effective for the backend storage system to do. And so there's like this, seemingly minor benefits to people, unless you happen to be one of those particular use cases that are like super difficult to solve. Like, like tiny writes is a particularly challenging problem to solve, just about any storage system, just because like that's not how file systems were designed. That's not how things were invented to do. And so being able to give you safety and the ability to absorb a massive spike of tiny writes, it's basically a huge shout out to the team. And I know some of the engineers are dialed in today. So there we go. I want to make sure that they get to watch at least this section. So thank you for having that shout out. We appreciate it.
Thank you. So one last question for you, Alex. So because of the time, so because let's just address this problem. Like, what is limited availabilities, and do we actually instantly scale up and scale to zero? Like, tell us a little bit about it. Like, do you want to?
Yeah. So look, there is no free lunch, and so let's talk about. So okay, limited availability means that we want to feel really comfortable when we start to take large dollar amounts to give you the level of uptime that people have. To date, our uptime for serverless is actually on par with our enterprise offerings, but we want to make sure that when we actually have that contract with you, that we're going to stand behind those things. And so it's just a matter of hitting particular scale. Obviously, Juxhin here has been in production for several months, so this is a production workload. We wouldn't put something that like would tame the brand. We are at a particular scale with the type of customers that we have, that whatever we put out has to be pretty good. Like, the days early on in the lifetime of Redpanda where we kind of put out something that maybe works a little bit, like those are gone. That was like the first couple of years of the company where it was mostly a bunch of nerds and friends of friends that were just getting started with the technology. And, they would DM you and it's like, hey, this doesn't work. And then you would rush and push up, fix. We're like a much more mature company. And, our customers are Fortune 5,000, right? So we kind of have that level already built in. Like these leverages, obviously, so okay. The only thing that is different is the front-end proxy tier, but all of the back-end cells have the same uptime availability that all of the rest of the clusters. So hopefully the idea is this is actually a much better uptime and availability for people. But we want to make sure we stand behind those things. And we're learning, right? So for the next couple of months, it's going to be in limited availability. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, then come back in a couple of months. Like Juxhin mentioned, I think this is ready for production workloads. And then what was the second part of that question? I want to make sure I answer.
Oh, no, like you answered all the questions. So thank you very much. But one last question though, like why do we created that cloud tier? Like, so what's the point?
Yeah, so it was, as you look at the number of developers in the world, right? It turns out that Kafka and Redpanda and basically most of our competitors today, they really cater to the mid-career to late-stage career engineer, someone that, it's relatively sophisticated, the Juxhins of the world, the Tuns of the world, the Taruns of the world, relatively sophisticated people that can put together very difficult, to connect things. And the goal with serverless is to give you the click-through UI that Tun showed, where you glue together a massive amount of disparate services. Frankly, the developer doesn't really care. That's like, I don't care how all of this is your problem. Like, I'll pay you dollars for this thing. I want to focus on writing Python in the case of Quix, or I want to focus on writing JavaScript on the case of serverless. And maybe Tarun, if you want to chime in here as a closing thought, but that was the impetus. The impetus is like, let's power every developer in the world. Like, why not? Why can't we be the company that powers all developers?
Exactly like you said. And so they're, like I said, they're enterprises of the world who are sophisticated customers who've always built those Kafka-based or like streaming applications. And then there's an early stage developer who wants to go from zero to a production application, in a click. And so like that's really the segment that we want to empower with this developer-focused experience.
And with that, we'll love to wrap up this call. Thanks to everyone. Thank you, Tarun, for joining us today for Amazon. Love having you. Tun, thank you, and the Quix team for partnering with us. And Juxhin, really the hero of this stream. People love hearing from real users. So there's no fluff. This is like in your own words, like, look, this is how I started. These were the challenges. This is how we got here. So thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to leave this call with a challenge to all of you joining today. If you haven't tried Redpanda Serverless, try it. There's a one-click link. And so if you have a GitHub or a Google, just click and then start counting the number of seconds. And let us know. If it takes more than 10 hours, I will send you a t-shirt. I can't even think of a time where it would take more than 10 seconds. So if it takes more than 10 seconds, post it on social media and I will send you a t-shirt. So for the time that you spend with us, as long as our t-shirt provider can send you t-shirts. And then I also wanted to close with a huge thanks to the entire team. Truly, this was like a multi-year effort and it touched every part of the company. And I know that the serverless team has been maniacally focused on that. And we've seen, multiple lunches from people and they just stay focused. So Thank you, team. Thank you for helping our users. And thanks, everyone, for joining the call. We wouldn't be here without you. So thanks again. And I hope everyone has a great week.